What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Sharing Our Stories. My name is Flynn with Nani Al-Jalil, and in between us, our guest for the evening today here on Sharing Our Stories. And thank you for joining us. If this is your first time here with us, this program is all about sharing stories of recovery. Everybody in this room has dealt with addiction, whether it was drugs, alcohol, or both. And we are now currently in our recovery. We want to celebrate that recovery. We want to share with you how we came to that recovery and where we are now. So it's the story of between us, Erin, thus far. And so we just want to let you know that through these stories that yes, we do recover and show you all the different pathways. So if you've joined us before, I like to tell you that they're not all the same. You might see similarities between one person's story and another, but everybody's story is unique. They are all so worthy. And I think it's really important that we hear them, we learn from them, and whether it helps you or maybe it helps a friend or a family member, it's an opportunity for us to share in recovery and say, yes, recovery happens, and to show you what it looks like. So thank you for being with us here. Nani, how you doing?
Hello, Slim. Yes.
Erin,
Hey.
welcome. Don't be nervous, okay? Most importantly, don't let the lights and the cameras and any of that bother you, all right? It's just me and Nani and you.
Awesome.
Here we are, making it happen today.
Awesome.
All right.
He's in a pod.
Yeah. I love it.
Come on, it should be a family atmosphere. I mean, one of the things that I love so much about recovery is every time I meet somebody in recovery, it only takes a few minutes to feel like, all right, we're family.
Yeah.
You know, we've already got something in common here.
Right.
So, like, where does it go from there?
100%.
So,
Well, my name is Erin Rasmussen, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. My sobriety date is March 12th, 2015. And so God willing, here in another month or so, I'll be celebrating a decade of recovery.
Come on.
Thank you.
Come on.
Thank you.
Well, we're just going to turn this over to you.
Okay.
All right. So I can see you ready to roll. So come on. From Park City, Utah, now here in the Mile High, it's Erin Rasmussen. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Rasmussen.
You did.
I had to practice. You know, I practiced ahead of time.
Congratulations. You did great.
I'm going to mess it up at the end, though. Erin Rasmussen is our guest here on Sharing Our Stories.
Yeah, so I did grow up in Park City, Utah. I'm a little snow bunny. I grew up skiing and snowboarding, and my mom and dad divorced when I was 4, and so my mom raised me for a number of years by herself, pretty much. My dad was around, but he probably wasn't around as much as I would have liked. He was my person when I was little. And so, but my mom is definitely my person today. She's my best friend. So Mom, if you're listening, I love you. And let's see, when I was 12, my baby brother was born, and that was a really great experience for me growing up, having a little kid around, getting to help raise him. And he's such a big part of my life when I was a teenager. And so I also have a stepbrother that's a couple years older than me and a wonderful stepdad that helped raise me. And when I graduated high school, I had already sort of started working on my drinking and drugging career. So when I was a freshman in college, it was kind of balls to the wall. I came out to Colorado actually to see you at Boulder.
Which was at the time like the #1 party school.
Like a notorious.
Notorious.
Yeah.
And that didn't have anything to do with my choice to go there, though. My choice to go there was based on their College of Engineering and Applied Science.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah.
You came with the right idea.
Yeah.
But
So
there was a lot of influence there, though, for sure.
tons of influence, tons of ways to get in trouble. And so, there was a little, dabbling in party drugs and getting way too drunk at frat parties, tons of that stuff going on. And I worked on my alcoholism hard when I turned 21. And so I think when I was a senior in college is when I started like experiencing my first withdrawal symptoms. and knew that that was 100% a bad sign, but didn't necessarily know what to do with that. All I knew was that I wanted to keep changing how I felt. And that was those were my first indications that something was going on mental health wise, right? But I didn't know that there was help available. I didn't know that wanting to change the way I felt nearly every second of every day, I didn't know how abnormal that really was. And so I just kept working on that drinking career. And I got my first professional job right out of college. I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where I worked for a company called CH2M Hill, and I worked on Nellis Air Force Base. That was one of the coolest jobs I've ever had. I saw a lot of cool shit. I definitely kept working on that drinking career though.
You're functioning very well at this point.
Yeah.
Functioning alcoholic.
Yes, definitely a functioning alcoholic. But it wasn't that bad yet. But it got progressively worse over the next couple of years. And that's when I started, having terrible withdrawal symptoms every day. I was drinking first thing in the morning. When I woke up, I'd have, a couple of shots here, a couple of shots there to steady my hands before going to work. It was definitely not a healthy existence by any means. But things, they always get worse, never better. And so I had no social life down there, which was like almost the saddest part of it is I didn't even dare put myself out there. I had no idea at that age. I actually just found out recently that I have this thing called social anxiety. And so, but I didn't have any clue then that's what I was suffering from, not wanting to go out and make friends and living that solitary life, drinking morning till night every day. It was just a miserable existence. I was miserable down there. And so fast forward to like age 24, almost 25, my dad, my biological father, he had some pretty severe back problems and he needed a couple of surgeries to correct those problems. And the first surgery he had didn't go very well. And so he was struggling taking care of himself and doing basic tasks like laundry and things. And so when the second surgery was coming up, I actually I put in for a transfer with my company. There was nowhere else for me to really go at Nellis Air Force Base. I was kind of at that ceiling as an engineer level 2, and I wasn't able to. I wasn't going to get promoted unless I moved. And so I put in for a transfer back to Salt Lake City, where my dad was living at the time, and I got moved. So it was good news for me at the time, and so I moved back to Salt Lake City, got a 1-bedroom apartment there for me and my cat. And my dad had that second surgery, and he didn't heal well after that. And so I'm trying to take care of my dad, can't even take care of myself. I'm a hopeless alcoholic already at the age of 25. And he wasn't improving. And I still remember how it really hit me that he was in a pretty hopeless state, is just him laying in bed and looking up at me and just going, "Sweetie, I just was not prepared for this." And so it was Mother's Day that year. So it was Mother's Day of 2013. And I was getting ready to go up and spend the day with my mom in Park City. And he wasn't answering the phone. So I thought, well, I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna check on him before I go up. And so I drove to his house, and the whole time there, I'm like praying that everything's gonna be okay. And which is silly because I didn't pray hardly at all at that point in my life. But here I'm throwing prayers up, please let my dad be okay. And I get there, I let myself in like I, so often did before. And he had taken his own life. And I was the unfortunate family member to find him. And I was so broken, just shattered, really. My heart and soul was broken. My dad was my best friend at that point in my life, and he was gone. And so it took, I don't think we buried him for like 6 weeks after that. And but after we buried him, it's like I came to this realization full force. Wow, like I'm doing the same thing my dad did. I'm killing myself. Like I could feel I could feel myself becoming more and more ill from alcohol. And it was, I think, June of that year that I made some decisions that I was going to change my life and I was going to change the way I was living, but I didn't know how to do that. And so I was trying to quit a million different ways on my own. And it wasn't until I actually had stopped drinking alcohol and I got the DTs really bad. And I was hallucinating. It was gnarly. Yeah. And I knew where I was going to go. I was going to run to my mom's house and to my safe place. And so I drove up to Park City, and the whole time, like, my car is breathing and all kinds of weird things are going on. I'm hearing voices through, I thought, the Bluetooth in my car. It was really bizarre. And I got up there, and my mom she had no idea what was wrong with me. And she took me to the hospital that night, and the doctors, of course I was blowing zeros. I hadn't had anything to drink. And I told the doctors what was going on, and they told me that there was nothing wrong with me, and they gave me a bag of fluids and sent me home.
Thanks.
And so the next day, my mom somehow got a hold of this interventionist in Salt Lake. And she just said, my daughter's not okay. I don't know what to do. She's alcoholic, and I don't know what to do to help her. And that interventionist it was a Sunday, he was playing golf. And he actually came to my mother's house after his round of golf and shows up on her front porch and says something like, I never make house calls on weekends. I'm in shorts. I don't even know what I'm doing here. And he came inside and asked my mom to have a moment alone with me. And I wish I could remember what he said, because I'd be using it on my clients right and left, right? And so I wish I could remember what he said, but he did get me to go to treatment that day. And that's where my recovery journey began. And so I went to 3 different treatment centers in the course of trying to get well. And it wasn't, I would string like a couple of months together out of treatment and then fall flat on my face. And I sustained more trauma by men, in the course of doing all of that, more trauma just from the consequences of my own actions also.
Was it the people that you were still associating with in your recovery that were causing you to relapse?
Well, yes and no. So the first time I went to treatment, I don't know, it's funny because my therapist at my first treatment center really tried to persuade me to go to sober living, and I wouldn't do it. I just insisted on going back to that 1-bedroom apartment where I was alone. Mm-hmm. And I actually had one of my treatment mates, and I don't talk about this often, but I had one of the guys that I was in treatment with needed somewhere to stay after treatment. And I allowed him to come stay with me, and he was very abusive. I won't go into details, but it was a really sick interaction that I had with this guy. And he ended up bringing alcohol into my home, and I resisted for a couple of days until I couldn't any longer. And so that was my experience out of my first treatment center. And then in between my first and second treatment center, I got engaged to my college sweetheart, and I moved in with him. And I went to my second treatment, came back, and I did okay for a couple of months. And then what got me that time was he had to go out of town on business. And it was the first time I had really been alone so far in recovery. And I just remember that voice in my head, like, you can drink and nobody will ever know. And so it was like just those lies that your own mind will tell you in early recovery. And I just, before I knew it, I was at the liquor store on the corner. All I had to do was walk there. It was a 5-minute walk away. And, so I bought 2 shooters, I think, the first time I was at the liquor store. And I thought, okay, this will give me just enough relief so that, I can stand to exist. I still didn't realize how abnormal it was to want to change the way I felt all the time. I didn't know that was mental illness. I didn't know that it was a mental health issue, an underlying mental health issue that was making me feel that way. So those 2 shooters, took those 2 shooters, and I was back at the liquor store within like 30 minutes. It was just insane how quickly that obsession came back. And so my fiance at the time came back from his trip, was like, oh my God, what the hell happened? And I had to explain to him just the insanity that goes on inside the alcoholic mind. And I don't think he ever fully understood, what it's like to live inside my own head. But the drinking, I could not stop. I had built a little bit of a fellowship around me where we were living in North Dakota at the time. And I kept going to those meetings after I relapsed. After I returned to use, I would drink sometimes all day, and then I'd go to a meeting at noon, maybe a meeting at night also. But I went to at least like 5 meetings a week while I was still drinking, and I just could not stop. I couldn't put it down, and that continued for about 6 months, and to the point where, my fiance at the time was like, enough is enough, and I've had it. You need to get back to treatment. And so I called that interventionist that saved my life the first time, and I was like, I'm in real big trouble. I need help. And he got me on a plane back to treatment. And the third time I went to treatment, something was different. Something was different inside of me. Something was different in my willingness to go to any length. We talk about that, being willing to go to any length to get and stay clean and sober. And I was just willing to do it. I was willing to take every single suggestion and at least try it. What did I have to lose? I mean, I really didn't have anything else to lose. And trust me, after 3 months in inpatient treatment, the last thing I wanted to do was put more time into my recovery away from my fiance. I had a 9-month-old puppy at home. I really wanted to get back, but I was willing to do everything. I wanted to take the buffet of recovery and have a little bit of it all. And so I went to sober living right after inpatient treatment, and it was just a total game changer for me to have that soft landing where I could go from that super sheltered, insulated environment and have that soft cushion, that soft landing, so that I didn't screw up again. I was terrified of what I might do. I had made pretty bad decisions in early recovery up until that point, and so I wanted to make sure that didn't happen again. And so, and after sober living, I went to stay with my mom again. Went back to my safe place because I knew I couldn't go back to North Dakota. I mean, there was nothing there for me. That was part of the reason I believe that I got drunk that second time around in recovery, is because there was nothing there for me. I wasn't working. I wasn't doing anything to propel myself forward. And so I was just scared to death to go back there. I mean, I knew the meetings and I knew where they were at, but that didn't help me before. I was going to all of the meetings and that didn't get or keep me sober. And so I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to move somewhere where I could be happy and not just be clean and sober. And I wasn't happy in North Dakota. And so I called up my fiance at the time and I said, if you love me and you really want to marry me, we're going to have to move because I'm not coming back there. And I'm willing to walk away from this relationship if you don't want to move. And I was totally 100% serious. I was willing to sacrifice anything for my recovery this time around. And that's what was different. I was willing to do anything, willing to go to any length, and willing to sacrifice anything in my way if I couldn't keep and hold on to this thing. And so I went to stay with my mom while he put in for a transfer with his company. And I said there are a couple of places I will go because he worked for an oil company. And so there were very limited places where that oil company was going to provide him a job. And so I said I will do, can't remember which options there were, but Denver was one of them. And I was like, that's my favorite option. I want to go back to Colorado. And a couple of months later it happened. So I did 3 months of treatment, and then I did 1 month in a traditional sober living house. And then I did 2 more months of what was sober living with my mom and my stepdad, because they didn't have 1 ounce of alcohol the entire time I stayed there. Well, I think my stepdad might have, but he wasn't open about it,
Yeah.
But I don't think my mom had 1 glass of wine that entire time. And
really
they were just
supportive of you.
yeah, hardcore supportive, like they always have been. And one really important thing that I was able to accomplish or start to accomplish my last time in treatment was I started to address all of my trauma. Trauma was a big catalyst for my substance abuse. It started when I was very, very young. Divorce traumatizes little kids. We know that. And so it started probably at around that time, and, had plenty of events that traumatized me plenty. But my dad's death was a really difficult instance of trauma that I had a really hard time with. That's one of the things that made it so difficult to hang on to my recovery once I had it. And so that was really, really important for me this last time around, was to figure out why I drink alcohol. And so we moved to Denver, and about a year later we got married. And about 6 months after that, I just couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting it. Why I wasn't, all of these people around me were telling me that, at a year and a half, this should become fairly effortless. But I was just totally miserable and I couldn't figure out why. And and my depression got really bad. I am diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, generalized anxiety disorder, ADHD, PTSD. I mean, I've got a few things, but my depression got so bad that I was having crying spells all the time. I couldn't get motivated. I couldn't get moving. It felt like I had cinder blocks tied to my feet. I just could not deal. And my husband at the time came home from work one day, and I'm just in a pile on the couch, bawling my head off. And he's like, "Listen, this isn't normal. We need help." And that's when I found my psychiatrist, who's still my psychiatrist today. And she kept putting me on different antidepressants, going, "Well, maybe this will help. Maybe this will help." And nothing really. It either didn't do anything for my symptoms or it made them worse. And so I went back to her, I think the 4th or 5th time, and she said, I don't think you have depression. We've been treating major depressive disorder, and I don't think that's what you have. I think you might be bipolar. And that diagnosis alone was devastating to me. I think bipolar disorder comes charged so much with misconceptions and beliefs that you're somehow broken if you're bipolar. And so, and I'm here to tell you that I'm very much so not broken. There's nothing inherently wrong with me. I'm just different than other people are built. And so we ended up finding a combination about maybe 6 to 9 months later, a combination of a couple of different medications that worked well for me. And one thing that helped us arrive at that so quickly was something called the Genome test. Have either
heard
one
of that?
You have?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is a genetic test. They just give you like a mouth swab. It's totally painless. And they do some genetic profiles on you that tell you what medications are on the market that might work with your brain chemistry, because not everybody's brain chemistry is the same. That's why we all respond to different psych meds differently. And so that kind of fast tracked me getting well. And once I got well, I was sort of like, okay, like I feel like I can live now. It was like a total aha component of my recovery was figuring out how to deal with my mental health issues. And so I got myself into therapy, which helped. I was still working the 12-step program. The 12-step program, I kind of credit the 12-step program with my success in recovery this time around, because there weren't all of these other cool modalities. You know, a decade ago, it was like AA, like your life depends on it, or like good luck. There weren't recovery coaches. There was no, recovery Dharma and all of these other cool programs out there that where we can find something that works for just about everybody. It was that, do this or else. And that was a lot of my sponsor's direction was, you do this or else. You do this way, or you're probably going to die. And she literally would tell me that. So the 12-step program 100% saved my life, because I threw myself into it 110%. And like I said before, that was what really made the difference this time around, was everything I tried, I tried 110%.
Totally hearing it.
And so anyways, I after I got some of my mental health issues addressed, all of a sudden life became more bearable. And then as I started to address it more and figure out all of these different ways that make me different and be able to, take care of myself in a better way, I I started to notice some big differences. I started to look forward to things. I started to, I didn't feel like crawling out of my skin 24/7. Turns out, all of these mental health issues and trauma were the big reasons why I drank to begin with. And so getting all of that underlying stuff figured out was, the biggest step towards happiness for me. For me today, it's not, it was chasing sobriety for a long time when I first got clean and sober, but now it's like the chasing of happiness. Like I'm chasing happiness instead of my next drink. And that's a beautiful thing. And so, I had switched gears in my career in early recovery also. I went to work as an insurance agent and I hated that. I absolutely hated it. And so I was coming home crying, but for a different reason. I was miserable at my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, ever since I stepped foot into sober living, I just thought, man, this is the bee's knees. This is what it's about. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen, is this little micro community of women taking care of one another when they can't take care of themselves. And so I think it was like my husband at the time and my mom both said to me, why don't you try to do something in recovery? What about doing sober living? You said it changed your life, and like, why not try that? And so what have I got to lose? I mean, I'm not getting any younger. I was I think 29 at the time, and I started planning. I started scheming, what would I have this look like if I were to try it? And I think 6 months worth of planning, in the off hours at night and on the weekends, and I was ready. So I started looking for a house, and I found one in no time. I think it was the third house I looked at. And that's my Phillips house today. And man, I took my sweet time though, getting that baby ready. I wanted it to be perfect. And so I did take my sweet time. And about 4 months later, I opened my first sober living house for women. And the name of it is Then Mountain Sober Living, in case you were wondering. And the rest is kind of just, it's all a blur, really. Life has gone so fast since I opened that first house. I opened a second one about 6 months after that. And then less than a year later, there was another company that was going to be shutting its houses down that sort of gifted my now fiance and I some houses. And so we opened those up, and then I opened a fifth one a year or two later. And so now I have 5 of these things, and I'm like, holy cow, how did this even happen? And so, it was the first month that I was open though. And about 3 weeks after opening, I received a phone call from some random dude. And he's like, hey, I have men's sober living houses, and I'm looking for somewhere to send the women that call my phone. What do you say we meet up and we tour each other's houses, and we refer back and forth? And I'm like, awesome, free referrals. I'm like,
Right, we all love that.
This is freaking great. And so I met up with this weird dude. I'm just kidding. Great dude. I met up with this guy named Scott Mounts, who owns Transition Sober Living. And I toured one of his houses, and he came and toured one of my houses. And I really could not stand the guy when I first met him. Couldn't stand him. I thought he was the most arrogant, I just thought he was, couldn't do it. But I'm like, let's give this guy a chance. Maybe he's got some things that he can teach me. And so, but over the next couple of months, and I kept seeing him at things, and we would refer back and forth, and we'd go to networking events together. We'd go to open houses together. And we started talking on the phone about different things, like strategies on how to get more clients or this or that. And before I knew it, this guy had really grown on me. So I was married at the time though. And so he was kept strictly in the friend zone. And it was maybe 6 months, 7 months of friendship. And then I really, the longer I stayed in recovery and the healthier I got, the more my husband at the time and I started to drift apart. And he would get angry when I would, well, maybe not angry, but he didn't love me staying out all hours of the night at my sober living houses, you know, trying to help these women. And he started to, I believe he felt a little neglected at times. And we just drifted apart like so many people do. He's a wonderful man. I still talk to him today. We still have a friendly relationship today. He's remarried, has an adorable little baby girl. He's just a great guy. I have nothing but great things to say about my ex-husband. But we were growing apart, and so in, I believe it was November of that year, I packed my car and packed my dogs and waited for him to come home. And I just said, I'm really unhappy. We hardly talk anymore, and I'm leaving. I'm moving into one of my sober living houses. So I moved back, and believe it or not, I moved back into sober living with like 3.5 years clean and sober. And I lived there for 1.5 years and was the house manager there for 1.5 years. And soon after I moved, Scott and I started dating, and we're still together today. And so, yeah, and we're engaged. We're engaged to be married sometime. Sometime that'll happen hopefully in October of this year. But it's been a wild ride. I never thought in a million years that I'd be where I am today professionally. I couldn't be happier with my family and with my family of choice. And all of my clients, they're what make my heart beat, man. And I started a recovery coaching company a little over 2 years ago, and that's going well as well. I have, I think 12 coaches at the time that work for me, and they're all wonderful. And
that's Nexus.
Nexus LLC, Nexus Peer Recovery Services, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. So
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So running sober livings, what is the most difficult part?
The interpersonal conflict. In women's houses, it's 100% and she stole my this, she drank my milk,
women's houses can be tough.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's definitely the interpersonal conflict. And early on, it was really, really hard to find my healthy boundaries. And so I really and that's probably, one of the reasons why my ex and I ended up getting divorced is because I didn't know when to say no. And I didn't know when to go home at night. And I didn't know, I was just so hungry to help people that I worked myself nearly to death within that first couple of years. It was really hard to learn how to take care of myself while taking care of others. And so that's been the most challenging piece, I think. And it still challenges me. I still sometimes don't know when to say no or when to say enough is enough and I've had enough. And I tended to, especially early on, to overextend myself and overpromise. And so, but I think, the interpersonal conflict and watching people not be able to hang on to this thing. Watching people return to use is really heartbreaking. And that was really hard for me for a long time. I had to learn how to separate myself from that and not own it myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. With your homes, I know I've gotten familiar just by, some of the women that that tribe has been able to send over there. And they're designed really beautifully in that the way that they're structured and the things that you have the women do. Was that because that was the experience that you had when you went through sober living, or because what's really worked for you in your recovery?
A lot of the structure in my homes was modeled after the sober living I went to,
Mm-hmm.
but I also incorporated a whole lot of stuff that I thought was missing. Like, oh, I wish there had been more of this or less of that. And so it was kind of taking my experience and saying, well, maybe it might have worked better this way. And so I also did a ton of research, like tons and tons of research, like what are the other sober livings doing? And, what do they have going on that like I want to try on for me? And so that was a lot of it, was just market research and finding out like what different sober livings were doing and what I wanted mine to look like.
And that's what I think is really cool about all of the sober livings that are kind of out there now, is that everybody has their own unique flavor, which means that there's somewhere for everybody.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that there is somewhere for everybody to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And early on, actually the first year that I was in business, Scott and we called all of the other sober livings that were in existence at that time. And we made a day of it. We said, hey, do you want to, hang out, go through each other's contracts and go and tour everybody's houses? And I think there were, I don't know, between 8 and 12 at that time. So I think there were 8 that we originally met up with. And some of those are still around today, some aren't. But we went to everyone's house and we went through everyone's contract, and so that we could make more of a recovery community out of those homes. And now, my gosh, look at how the industry's grown in Denver. I mean, there's literally hundreds of sober living homes. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful to see. And it's so cool to be able to say, like, I was one of the originals. I was one of the OG 8 in Denver. It's cool to be able to say that and to see how far we've come since then.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being one of the first.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Hey,
it's my pleasure.
Somebody has to do it.
It's my pleasure.
And it's so cool that now, like, you see people talk about recovery in Denver all the time. Mm-hmm. You see it in your social media. It's something that it's not something people are ashamed of anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's cool to be clean and sober. Yeah. You get support now. I can't remember the last time that I've run into somebody who was like, so why do you not drink?
Yeah, I don't get that much anymore.
You don't get that anymore. Now it's like, okay, I've thought about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you have? Do you want to have this conversation now, or are you enjoying yourself? Because we can have this conversation right now. How many women do you currently have in your homes?
I don't have an exact count, but I have 55 beds. Oh. So I have 5 homes. Each one of them has 11 beds, and I think we're around 80 or 90.
And how many years?
7. Almost 7. 7 in March.
Graduates. I'm just trying to do some.
Yeah.
Over 1,000. I'll do the math for you.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's the most rewarding work that I've ever done, and I've kind of dipped my toes in a few different pools, but I found my thing, and it's this, and it's working in recovery.
If you didn't know you have purpose, you do now.
Yeah. Right. Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who has a family member who's suffering an addiction? They want to help?
Well, I always say, like, no one has to suffer alone in this. And I mean, both the person that's being afflicted by the disease and also the family. No one ever has to suffer in silence or suffer alone. And so, my number one thing would be, start pull up your phone and start Googling, recovery resources in Denver, because there are so many different places for someone to receive help. It doesn't matter if the affected person is is male or female, you know, they can always call me 100%. And I am more than happy to help a family that's in need. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of reaching out and not staying silent any longer. It's such a neat community that we've built together that and it's too big and too massive and too cool for people to suffer alone anymore.
So Zen Mountain Sober Living and Nexus LLC.
Right.
Nexus LLC is your peer resource. It's a training.
Peer recovery, peer support specialists that
Okay.
work. They work in sober living houses. They work at treatment centers.
Okay.
They work with the judicial system. They're really all over the place. They're rock stars. And so, but it's Nexus Peer Recovery Services is kind of the long name for
Okay.
it. But they're peer coaches that do awesome work out there in the world.
And so do you train them, or you have people that are trained and then you kind of outsource?
So they're all trained.
Mhm.
They all are certified peer specialists, but they're only some of them are state certified or NADAC certified, which is the national credential for peer coaches. And so, but they are, we sometimes do put people through training, and we invest in our
That's
professionals. And
okay.
so if they come to us and they have no training whatsoever, and they'd be if they'd kick butt at coaching, then we'll put them through their base certification. And then if we have coaches that only have that base certification, we'll put them through additional training to achieve their state or national certification. So we're all about reinvesting in our professionals in early recovery, and that's kind of what it's all about.
That's so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really, and that means a lot to the people too, you know.
Yeah, they're pretty grateful when we offer to pay for class, because those classes are not cheap.
They're not.
They are
They're
not cheap. So
Mhm.
they're pretty grateful when we offer to do that. It's pretty cool.
You got to have faith in people.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So our guest has been Erin Rasmussen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I thought for sure that, at the end of
You
this,
got it.
I wouldn't do so well. Erin Rasmussen with Zen Mountain Sober Living and Nexus LLC. You're also a board member for another organization?
Yeah, so I sit on the board of Illuminate Recovery Services.
Okay.
And then I also will be sitting on the board for Serenity Stables Offensive Recovery Foundation.
We know Serenity.
Yeah.
We
So-
love Christine. Yeah.
she is awesome.
She's amazing.
She is a very good friend of mine, and so shout out to her.
Shout out.
yeah.
Yes, I love what she's doing.
Yeah, she's doing some really cool stuff
Yes.
with for the listeners. That's equine assisted peer recovery services. So she works with horses and brings the clients out to her ranch, and they have some fun. And so yeah, it's cool stuff.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being our guest. Thank you for the work that you do. Congratulations on your recovery. Congratulations on where you have progressed to
Thank you.
and what you do.
And thank you so much for having me tonight. It's really been a pleasure to meet you guys and talk some more. And yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
I'm
rock.
glad
You
were
rock,
here.
superstar.
Oh, so do you guys.
Come on.
You rock hard.
Come on now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love in this building.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love for recovery. So for real, thank you. Thank you so much, Erin.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Is there a number for people to reach you at?
Yes, they can reach out to us on our business line at 720-515-3299. And they can also reach me on my cell phone if they'd like. And that number is 435-640-6824.
All right.
Awesome.
You guys can run that back if you need it. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to be a guest on Sharing Our Stories, please contact us right on Facebook. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/SOS Sharing Our Stories. All we ask is that you have a year in recovery, and please come and share. Our guest has been Erin Rasmussen.
Yes.
With Zen Mountain Sober Living and Nexus LLC. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again here on Sharing Our Stories.
He's the OG.